They look for edges within the image, and they'll add contrast. So the unsharp mask, we talked about the amount, how it will control the amount of sharpening, the amount of contrast that gets added. The radius is how far on either side of the edge that contrast gets applied. And the threshold was how much difference there has to be between the light side of the edge and the dark side of the edge before the filter decides that it is in fact an edge and applies that contrast. So here you can see that we have a really low contrast edge, like the light side is barely noticeably lighter than the dark side, but with a threshold of 0, we can see that contrast being applied. If I bring the threshold up, here we are at 60, it says there has to be at least 60 levels of difference between the light side and the dark side, 60 levels from that 0 to 255 grayscale range before the filter decides that it is in fact an edge and applies that contrast. So you can see it's not until we get out to here that it says, oh yeah, there's enough difference, we'll apply that contrast. We took a look at some things that could go wrong when you're doing sharpening. Like let's say, for example, you might remember this image here, there was a little bit of chromatic aberration around the eyes, the nose, the really contrasting edges. Chromatic aberration, abnormal color. There's a little bit of a cyanish fringe along the top edges, a little bit of a reddish fringe along the bottom edges. And with sharpening, enhancing the contrast, if I just made interesting. I've got 3 layers here. I've got my main image without any retouching. I've got the retouching layer here. I've got this soft light dodge and burn layer for the wrinkles in the dress down there. Which of these layers do we decide I would do the sharpening on? Any of them? All of them? Yeah, I'd make a merged copy of all of them. Typically, sharpening is kind of the last thing that you do before you send it off to the client. You know, the client said, everything looks good, send us the final. You would flatten it down, sharpen it up for the magazine. Send it off, give them a TIFF file. Keep your layered PSD file, because that's if you need to make any changes. You're going to print it in the print lab. You're going to flatten it down, sharpen it appropriately for the Epson printers. You're going to post it to Instagram, scale it down, sharpen it appropriately for that size of image. And usually that TIFF, whatever you send off to the client, it's kind of a throwaway thing. The PSD is your working file. If you did want to keep a sharpened version on this image, you'd have to do it to all the layers. Easiest way is just to make a merged copy of them. The slow route would be select all or Command A. We could then copy merged, which would make a merged copy of all those layers there, and then simply paste it back in, and there's a merged copy of everything. Anybody remember the keyboard shortcut for making that merged copy? Command, Option, Shift, and there's where you use the other hand, otherwise you break your fingers trying to do it. E, there's that merged copy of everything. Now when I did the sharpening, I kind of did it like, way beyond what you would do for a normal image, just so you could see the effect there. And if I did a filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and I'll crank up the amount and the radius, turn the preview on so you can see it here, and if we hit OK, holy mackerel, look at how much that red chromatic aberration and that cyan chromatic aberration on the top edge just kind of stood out there. Was there a way that we could sharpen the image without exaggerating that edge along there? We talked about the different color modes, like we're in additive color here, so we've got red, green, and blue as our primary colors. There was another color mode that broke it down differently, wasn't there? Anybody remember what that was? It's the same color mode that we use when we're looking at color profiles. These are presented to us as a lightness channel, so how light the pixel is from black all the way up to white, and 2 color channels. If we flip this around to the top surface here, we see our color channel A, which is how red or how green the color is, and our color channel B, which is how blue or how yellow the color is. So somewhere within this 3D space, every color exists. L, A, and B, lightness, color channel A, and color channel B. And if I were to convert this image mode, LAB color, you'll notice, don't flatten it, that the channels have changed. Instead of a red, green, and blue, we have a lightness channel, a color channel A, which is where on that axis the red and green is, and B, which is where on that axis the blue and yellow is. And if I were to sharpen only this lightness channel, let's say I made my merged copy of everything, Command, Option, Shift, E, and I just selected the lightness channel. Filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. It remembers all the settings because it's a sticky option. When I hit OK, there we go. And if I pop back into LAB, I've done the same basic amount of sharpening, but without that exaggeration of colors. Here's the LAB sharpening. Here's the RGB. You can see that little bit of cyan and a little bit of the red across the top there. LAB, RGB.